The office floor was alive with its usual rhythm, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, and voices murmuring over deadlines. Rows of cubicles lined the spacious hall, each occupied by employees lost in their tasks. The faint smell of coffee drifted through the air, mixing with the sterile scent of paper and ink. In the farthest corner, Aaliya sat at her desk, shoulders hunched, eyes glued to her computer screen. She was the kind of worker who never drew attention, quiet, diligent, and always meeting her deadlines. To most, she was just another employee blending into the crowd, but beneath her calm exterior, a storm brewed. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed, and her vision blurred now and then. She rubbed her temples, hoping no one would notice her pale complexion. The truth was, Aaliya hadn't eaten properly in days. Most of her paycheck went toward rent and her younger brother's medication. Whatever little was left was barely enough for groceries. She had grown used to going hungry, telling herself she could endure it if it meant her family survived. But lately, things had become harder to ignore. Her heart pounded harder with every passing second, as if her body was warning her it couldn't keep up with her sacrifices any longer. She had been struggling with nausea for weeks, exhaustion weighing her down like an invisible chain. Still, she pushed through, refusing to let weakness show. "Miss Aaliya, could you bring me the finance report?" Her supervisor called out. "Yes, sir," she answered, her voice steady though her body wasn't. She grabbed the file from her desk and stood up, but the moment her weight shifted to her feet, the ground beneath her seemed to tilt. Her knees buckled. A wave of dizziness blurred the office lights into a swirl. She tried to grip the edge of her desk, but her strength failed. The file slipped from her hand, papers scattering across the floor. Gasps filled the office as Aaliya collapsed, her frail body crumpling onto the carpeted floor. "Aaliya," someone shouted. A few coworkers rushed toward her, their panic breaking through the monotonous hum of office life. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hall. The heavy, sharp click of polished Italian shoes cut through the chaos like a warning bell. Everyone froze as a tall figure entered, the CEO, Rayhan Malik. The entire office seemed to shrink in his presence. He was known as a man of steel, a ruthless businessman with sharp instincts and an even sharper tongue. No one dared to cross him, and very few had ever seen him show even a shred of emotion. But when his gaze fell upon the unconscious young woman lying on the floor, something in his usually unreadable expression flickered. "What happened?" His deep voice carried authority, silencing the whispers around him. She just fainted, sir," one of the assistants stammered. "Move aside," Rayhan ordered firmly. Without hesitation, he dropped to one knee beside Aaliya. The sight was startling, this man in a perfectly tailored Armani suit, kneeling on the floor without a thought to the dust or his reputation. He gently lifted her head, resting it against his arm. Her face was pale, her lips slightly dry, and strands of hair clung to her damp forehead. She looked far too fragile, like a porcelain doll on the verge of breaking. "Call the company doctor, immediately," he said, his tone leaving no room for delay. As one assistant scrambled to make the call, Rayhan carefully gathered her scattered belongings. A small, worn-out handbag had spilled open, its contents spread across the floor, old receipts, a faded wallet, a tiny notebook. He began placing them back inside, his movements automatic, until his eyes landed on a folded sheet of paper. He picked it up, intending to return it, without a second glance, but something about it caught his attention. The bold, unmistakable words at the top made his breath hitch for the first time in years. "Pregnancy test. Positive." For a long moment, the bustling office seemed to fade into silence around him. He stared at the paper in his hand, his usually sharp eyes clouded with disbelief. The man who was feared for his icy composure now sat frozen, his heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in decades. He looked down at Aaliya again, still unconscious in his arms, and a rush of questions flooded his mind. "She's pregnant, and she's been working like this, with no one to lean on. How long has she been hiding this?" His jaw clenched, not out of anger at her but at the thought of what she must have endured silently. The bruised shadows beneath her eyes, her frail body, her exhaustion, it all made sense now. The whispers in the office grew louder. Some employees exchanged glances, curious and nervous about their CEO's unusual reaction. But Rayhan didn't care. For the first time in years, his thoughts weren't on profit margins or quarterly reports, they were on the fragile young woman in his arms and the secret she had been forced to carry alone. His grip on the test paper tightened slightly before he slipped it discreetly into his pocket. Nobody else needed to see it. Not yet. Looking down at her again, he whispered under his breath, too softly for anyone else to hear, "What kind of burden have you been carrying all this time, Aaliya?" And in that moment, Rayan Malik, the man the world knew as untouchable, unshakable, and unfeeling, felt something stir deep within him, something that told him this woman's story was about to change his own life forever.